Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. I have Izabela with me today, and I'm really excited for this conversation. We teamed up on her show last week, and now I get to sit in the interviewer seat. So I personally am very pumped for this episode. But before I get to all the questions that I've got for you in this kind of like balancing act of resilience and resistance, or how to turn resistance into resilience, can you give everybody a real quick introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And my background is obviously being heavily focused on change and transformation, and from individual, team, all the way to organizational level. I'm being known as a champion of people, and that's something that I'm really proud of, because I always understood how important asset to any organization and success and any business, frankly, people are. And being a strong advocate for that helped me out not only to influence and support leadership, but also instill some really effective ways to overcome these challenges that we're so many organizations facing today.
Well, thank you for joining me. And I gave the teaser, I flipped it around the first time, but that we're going to be talking a little bit about resistance and moving into resilience. So, kind of to get us started, can you share from your experience how you see the idea of resistance to change kind of turning into a little bit of like maybe a tornado in terms of this spiral effect from, individual person resisting change to then how that impacts a team and then ultimately the overall culture of a company over time?
That's an excellent question. And obviously, for everybody the watching and listening, we all go through different phases. And depending how much we're being already prior exposed, it's going to be something that inherently is going to help us to navigate that for good or for worse, depending how it is. Nature, just by nature of change, we know that people only change either when things are too painful, and very small percentage, which is less than, I would say, 3 to 5% people proactively change about something because they have a desire and they wanted to be proactive about it. So given the nature, how human works, now you can imagine with plethora of changes that are happening, how they're affecting everyone, right? And when we look at on individual levels, like let me use analogy for tornado. If you never experienced tornado, you don't know, or you never seen one or watched any tornado aftermath, even virtually, you may not have no sense of how dangerous it can be and also how you should act or react. Let's pretend that you don't know. In that scenario, obviously, you might just undermine that. You might just be in denial how important it is to seek the shelter or do extra measurements. On the flip side, if you're someone who had a chance to experience a tornado firsthand, and let's say numerous times, you may build a level of resilience already and then have a sense of expectation. So you will be acting differently. But even if you did not experience tornado before, let's just say you build yourself up to really embrace, and you're that part of that 3 or 5% that are proactive seekers for change for better for their own individual and obviously team and organizational aspect, then you have a very different mindset, right? So I would say what's really important is to really look at how do we have response? And it's all tied as obviously not only to our emotional intelligence, but also our emotional capacity. It's also tied how we're able to do critical thinking and how quickly we can assess the situation. And then from there, it's going to really help us out to navigate the process. But from psychology standpoint, we go often in the 5 stages, which when I tell you what those are, you probably will be like, oh, I can see this. And if you really measure and look at with yourself and more self-awareness, you will know exactly where the problems are. So for example, we start with denial, and then we get with frustration or anger just because it's inconvenience, right? And all of a sudden it's like, what are you talking about? What tornado? What do you mean? And specifically when somebody talk about level 3 or 4 or 5, you don't have no sense of what that is, right? And then you're trying to figure it out, like, how can I negotiate so that I can get out of this situation? And sometimes there is nothing to bargain and negotiate. Sometimes it's truly just the need to execute on that. And then a lot of times people, just because it's known and fear factors start kicking in, we go for depression or anxiety, and we start feeling, because that all of a sudden is like, oh my God, this is really getting serious. I don't know what to do, right? And then to get to the point of acceptance. And this 5 stages can go very quick in a split of second. And sometimes you skip some, or it can be a combination of multiple ones at once. And I've seen that very often with people. So now bringing that back to organizations. Every single one of us have a certain level of threshold, what we're comfortable with and what level of change. And if we don't know what implication that's going to have on personal level, it's going to be really, really hard to navigate.
So then when we're looking for like these signs and signals that maybe we're going to start moving through this process of acceptance of a change, but we're going to get hung up in this like realm of resistance and kind of start that tornado, what are signs that leaders should be looking for to intervene with early so that we don't get to the point where it creates this whirlwind?
It's very important for them to understand the makeup and DNA of their teams, right? And that really dictates how well-rounded culture is. Understanding how quickly we can collaborate, how can we also, what level of morale of an organization it is, and also level of productivity and collaboration. So when you have that in place, which sadly most organizations don't, when something dramatic starts happening, or something out of the blues, as they say, or something that is truly affecting on the larger scale, not only just, let's say, one department, but or across the organization. It's really important also to know how to obviously communicate to the team. And if you don't have already established that foundation, it's going to be extremely challenging. So I really wanted to point it out how important it is from leaders to really understand themselves first. Who are they, how as a leaders, how they're being perceived, how they show up, and is that going to be effective in scenarios like this? We see a lot of leaders that are very casual, they're also very easygoing, but also have a very hard time to be assertive, or very hard time to exercise different parts of that it's really required in those situations. So I would highly recommend for leaders that are watching and listening to really pay attention, understanding of your team, after yourself, of course, and then also really understanding the attitudes, what attitudes is needed to really navigate this effectively. How can you also lower and the risk issues that are on the hand, and then how can you flip them and then really champion and find the cheerleaders on your team, and you become the champion and cheerleader for others to really embrace that. Otherwise, as you know, things gonna twist and stall, or not gonna have everybody's consensus, and not everybody will be going in the same direction. And we know what happens when we're going in so many different directions, don't we?
We forget to bring tennis shoes to the gym, and we leave going clogs like we talked about during our last discussion. So when we look at those cheerleaders then, and we've been able to intervene and we turn those people into really resilient team members that are championing our change, how does that then have the reverse effect of the tornado? And how does that spiral in a way that helps improve the overall company culture as well?
I love the question, because obviously we want it to be, now that we're in the crisis and situation, think about it. What can we do, and how can we mitigate the risks, right? How can we get everybody to safety, but also making sure that everybody is doing and contributing, doing their part, so that as a result, when we get whatever we're trying to get, it's happening in an effective and efficient way. So it's very important. I call it cheerleader and champions, because it's very important to really understand who are those early adopters, who are the guys and gals that have the already mindset, that are prone and open for change, and that are flexible. Those are the easiest one, not only to mold and also obviously bring to the forefront of the innovation and transformation with the organization, but also help to sustain and promote the change and why change is necessary. So in those scenarios, obviously, it would be important to understand on the team level, who you can assign the certain task, right? On the company level, we will have to also understand what type of leadership models are there, and then how do you navigate from cultural standpoint, what do you normalize, what do you don't. And one thing that I found that is common thread through all of it, we see a lot of conversations around agile projects, but we don't really talk about how necessary in those situations is to have agile leadership, agile culture, and also agile change and transformation. What that means is small increments, right? Things that are easy to sustain. And while you sustain them for that immediate danger, then you have another increment. How do you know what lessons do you learn from that? Or what are we going to do next time better? And you have so many points of conversation and also showing and demonstrating, because that's how we as adults learn the best. You know that from also your experience, not only in the industry, but also from the training, right? It's like, how do we also make sure whatever we are experiencing, that we are understanding cause and effect of it, and also be able to not only learn from it, but position better for the next time.
Thank you so much for joining me for the conversation, and for everybody who's watching. And if you're not already, what are you doing? Go follow Izabela on LinkedIn and other channels. Like I said, we've got some team ups going back both directions, so make sure to catch those as well. But thank you so much for joining me for the conversation, and have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. If you like what you saw, be sure to come back on a weekly basis and subscribe for more expert interviews focused on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.